Master! Welcome home! Huh? What's wrong? Oh, I see. You had a really rough day, huh? Well then, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and lie down. My lap is soft, right? I'm so thankful. Huh? Is it hard to fall asleep? I guess I'll have to read you my special bedtime story then. The Holocaust, also referred to as the Shoah, was a genocide during World War II in which Nazi Germany, aided by its collaborators, systematically murdered some 6 million European Jews, around 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe. Between 1941 and 1945, Jews were targeted for extermination as part of a larger event involving the persecution and murder of other groups, including in particular the Roma and incurably sick, as well as ethnic Poles and other Slavs, Soviet citizens, Soviet prisoners of war, political opponents, gay men, and Jehovah's Witnesses, resulting in up to 17 million deaths overall. I'm sorry, I'm so clumsy. You know, Master? Okay, I'll continue. Germany implemented the persecution in stages, following Adolf Hitler's rise to power in 1933. The government passed laws to exclude Jews from civil society, most prominently the Nuremberg Laws in 1945. Starting in 1933, the Nazis built a network of concentration camps in Germany for political opponents and people deemed undesirable. After the invasion of Poland in 1939, the regime set up ghettos to segregate Jews. Over 42,000 camps, ghettos, and other detention sites were established. You know, I'm sorry I keep messing up, Master. It's just these numbers and years are hard to remember. But I'll try my best. Where was I? The deportation of Jews to the ghettos culminated in the policy of extermination the Nazis called the final solution to the Jewish question. Discussed by senior Nazi officials at the Wannsee Conference in Berlin in January 1942, as German forces captured territories in the east, all anti-Jewish measures were radicalized. Under the coordination of the SS, with directions from the highest leadership of the Nazi Party, killings were committed within Germany itself. Throughout Germany-occupied Europe, and across all territories controlled by the Axis powers, paramilitary death squads called Einsatzgruppen, in cooperation with Wehrmacht police battalions and local collaborators, murdered around 1.3 million Jews in mass shootings between 1941 and 1945. By mid-1942, victims were being deported from the ghettos in sealed freight trains to extermination camps, where if they survived the journey, they were killed in gas chambers. The killing continued until the end of World War II in Europe in May 1945. With the establishment of the Third Reich in 1943, German leaders proclaimed the rebirth of the Volksgemeinschaft, aka People's Community. Nazi policies divided the population into two groups, the Volksgenossen, national comrades who belonged to the Volksgemeinschaft, and the Gemeinschaftsfremde, community aliens who did not. Enemies were divided into three groups: the racial or blood enemies, such as the Jews and Roma; political opponents of Nazism, such as Marxists, liberals, Christians, and the reactionaries, viewed as wayward national comrades; and moral opponents, such as gay men, the work-shy, and habitual criminals. The latter two groups were to be sent to the concentration camps for re-education, with the aim of eventual absorption into the Volksgemeinschaft. Racial enemies could never belong to the Volksgemeinschaft. They were to be removed from society. Before and after the March 1933 Reichstag elections, the Nazis intensified their campaign of violence against opponents. They set up concentration camps for extrajudicial imprisonment. One of the first, at Dachau, opened on the 9th of March 1933. Initially, the camp contained mostly communists and social democrats. Other elderly prisons were consolidated by mid-1934 into purpose-built camps outside the cities, run exclusively by the SS. The initial purpose of the camps was to serve as deterrent by terrorizing Germans who did not conform. From the 1930s, the legal, economic, and social rights of Jews were steadily restricted. On the 1st of April 1933, there was a boycott of Jewish businesses. On the 7th of April 1933, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service was passed, which excluded Jews and other non-Aryans from the civil service. Jews were disbarred from practicing law, being editors or proprietors of newspapers, or joining the Journalists' Association. Jews were not allowed to own farms. In Silesia, in March 1933, a group of men entered the courthouse and beat up Jewish lawyers. Friedlander writes that in Dresden, Jewish lawyers and judges were dragged out of courtrooms during trials. Jewish students were restricted by quotas from attending schools and universities. Jewish businesses were targeted for closure or Aryanization, the forcible sale to Germans. Of the approximately 50,000 Jewish-owned businesses in Germany in 1933, about 7,000 were still Jewish-owned in 1939. I'm sorry. I guess I'm getting a little bit sleepy too. Works by Jewish composers, authors, and artists were excluded from publications, performances, and exhibitions. Jewish doctors were dismissed or urged to resign. The Deutsches Ärzteblatt, a medical journal, reported on 6th of April 1933, Germans are to be treated by Germans only. The Nazis used the phrase lebensunwertes Leben, life unworthy of life, in reference to the disabled and mentally ill. On 14th of July 1933, the law for the prevention of hereditarily diseased offspring, Gesetz zur Verhütung erbkranken Nachwuchses, the sterilization law, was passed, allowing for compulsory sterilization. The New York Times reported on 21st of December that year, 400,000 Germans to be sterilized. There were 84,525 applications from doctors in the first year. The courts reached a decision in 64,499 of those cases. 56,444 were in favor of sterilization. Estimates for the number of involuntary sterilizations during the whole of the Third Reich range from 300,000 to 400,000. In October 1939, Hitler signed the Euthanasia decree, backdated to the 1st of September 1939, that authorized Reichsleiter Philipp Bohler, the chief of Hitler's chancellery, and Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal physician, to carry out a program of involuntary euthanasia. After the war, this program was named Aktion T4. It was named after Tiergartenstrasse 4, the address of a villa in the Berlin borough of Tiergarten, where the various organizations involved were headquartered. T4 was mainly directed at adults, but the euthanasia of children was also carried out. Between 1939 and 1941, 80,000 to 100 mentally ill adults in institutions were killed, as were 5,000 children and 100 Jews, also in institutions. In addition, there were specialized killing centers, where the deaths were estimated at 20,000. According to Georg Renno, the deputy director of Schloss Hartheim, one of the euthanasia centers, or 4,000 according to Frank Seyreis, the commandant of Mauthausen concentration camp. Overall, the number of mentally and physically handicapped murdered was about 150,000. Although not ordered to take part, psychiatrists in many psychiatric institutions were involved in the planning and carrying out of Aktion T4 at every stage. After protests from the German Catholic and Protestant churches, Hitler ordered the cancellation of the T4 program in August 1941. Although he disabled and mentally ill continued to be killed until the end of the war. The medical community regularly received bodies and body parts for research. Eberhard Karl University received 1,077 bodies from executions between 1933 and 1945. The neuroscientist Julius Hallervorden received 697 brains from one hospital between 1940 and 1944. I accepted these brains, of course. Where they came from and how they came to me was really none of my business. On the 15th of September 1945, the Reichstag passed the Reich Citizenship Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, known as the Nuremberg Laws. The former said that only those of German or kindred blood could be citizens. Anyone with 3 or more Jewish grandparents was classified as a Jew. The second law said marriages between Jews and the subjects of the state of German or related blood are forbidden. Sexual relationships between them were also criminalized. Jews were not allowed to employ German women under the age of 45 in their homes. The laws referred to Jews but applied equally to the Roma and Black Germans. Nazi racial policy aimed at forcing Jews to emigrate. 50,000 German Jews had left Germany by the end of 1944, and by the end of 1938, approximately half the German Jewish population had left the country. Among the prominent Jews who left was the conductor Bruno Walter, who fled after being told that the hall of the Berlin Philharmonic would be burned down if he conducted a concert there. Albert Einstein, who was abroad when Hitler came to power, never returned to Germany. He was expelled from the Kaiser Wilhelm Society and the Prussian Academy of Sciences, and his citizenship was revoked. Other Jewish scientists, including Gustav Hertz, lost their teaching positions and left the country. In March 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Austrian Nazis broke into Jewish shops, stole from Jewish homes and businesses, and forced Jews to perform humiliating acts such as scrubbing the streets or cleaning toilets. Jewish businesses were Aryanized, and all the legal restrictions on Jews in Germany were imposed. In August, Adolf Eichmann was put in charge of the Central Agency for Jewish Emigration. About 100,000 Austrian Jews had left the country by May 1939. I'm sorry. I get the years messed up. Including Sigmund Freud and his family. The Evian Conference was held in July 1938 by 32 countries as an attempt to help the increased refugees from Germany, but aside from establishing the largely ineffectual Intergovernmental Committee of Refugees, little was accomplished, and most countries participating did not increase the number of refugees they would accept. On the 7th of November 1948, Herschel Greenspan, a Polish Jew, shot the German diplomat Ernst von Rath in the German embassy in Paris in retaliation for the expulsion of his parents and siblings from Germany. Von Rath died on 9th of November. The government used his death as a pretext to instigate a pogrom against the Jews throughout the Third Reich. The government claimed it was spontaneous, but in fact, it had been ordered and planned by Hitler and Goebbels. Although with no clear goals, according to David Cesarani, the result, he writes, was murder, rape, looting, destruction of property, and terror on an unprecedented scale. Known as Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass, the attacks were partly carried out by the SS and SA, but ordinary Germans joined in. In some areas, the violence began before the SS and SA arrived. Over 7,500 Jewish shops out of 9,000 were looted and attacked, and over 1,000 synagogues were damaged or destroyed. Groups of Jews were forced by the crowd to watch their synagogues burn. In Bensheim, they were forced to dance around it, and Laupheim to kneel before it. At least 90 Jews died. The damage was estimated at 39 million Reichsmarks. Cesarani writes that the extent of desolation stunned the population and rocked the regime. 30,000 Jews were sent to the Dachau, Buchenwald, and Sachsenhausen concentration camps. Many were released within weeks. By early 1939, 2,000 remained in the camps. German Jewry was held collectively responsible for restitution of the damage. They also had to pay an atonement tax of over a billion Reichsmarks. Insurance payments for damage to their property were confiscated by the government. A decree on the 12th of November 1948 barred Jews from most of the remaining occupations they had been allowed to hold. Kristallnacht marked the end of any sort of public Jewish activity and culture, and Jews stepped up their efforts to leave the country. Before World War II, Germany considered mass deportation from Europe of Germany and later European Jewry. Among the areas considered for possible resettlement were British Palestine and French Madagascar. After the war began, German leaders considered deporting
Europe's Jews to Siberia. Palestine was the only location to which any German relocation plan produced results via the Havara Agreement between the Zionist Federation of Germany and the German government. This resulted in the transfer of about 60,000 German Jews and $100 million from Germany to Palestine. But it ended with the outbreak of World War II. In May 1940, Madagascar became the focus of new deportation efforts because it had unfavorable living conditions that would hasten deaths. Several German leaders had discussed the idea in 1938, and Adolf Eichmann's office was ordered to carry out resettlement planning, but no evidence of planning exists until after the fall of France in June 1940. But the inability to defeat Britain prevented the movement of Jews across the seas, and the end of Madagascar plan was announced on the 10th of February 1942. The Nuremberg trials were a series of military tribunals held by Allied forces after World War II in Nuremberg, Germany, to prosecute prominent members of the political, military, and economic leadership of Nazi Germany. The first of these trials was the 1945 and 1946 trial of the major war criminals before the International Military Tribunal. This tribunal tried 22 political and military leaders of the Third Reich. Except for Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, and Joseph Goebbels, all of whom had committed suicide several months before. The prosecution entered indictments against 24 major war criminals and 7 organizations, the leadership of the Nazi Party, the Reich Cabinet, the Schutzstaffel, Sicherheitsdienst, the Gestapo, the Sturmabteilung, and the General Staff and High Command. The indictments were for participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of a crime against peace, planning, initiating, and waging wars of aggression and other crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The tribunal passed judgments ranging from acquittal to death by hanging. 11 defendants were executed, including Joachim von Ribbentrop, Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Rosenberg, and Alfred Jodl. Ribbentrop, the judgment declared, played an important part in Hitler's final solution of the Jewish question. Further trials at Nuremberg took place between 1946 and 1949, which tried a further 185 defendants. West Germany initially tried few ex-Nazis, but after the 1958 Einsatzgruppen trial, the government set up a governmental agency to investigate crimes. Other trials of Nazis and collaborators took place in Western and Eastern Europe. In 1960, Israeli Mossad agents kidnapped Adolf Eichmann in Argentina and brought him to Israel to stand trial for war crimes. The trial ended in his conviction in December 1961 and his execution in May 1962. Eichmann's trial and death revived interest in war criminals and the Holocaust in general. In March 1951, the government of Israel requested $1.5 billion from the Federal Republic of Germany to finance the rehabilitation of 5,000 Jewish survivors, arguing that Germany had stolen $6 billion from the European Jews. Israelis were divided about the idea of taking money from Germany. The The Conference on Jewish Material Claims against Germany, known as the Claims Conference, was opened in New York, and after negotiations, the claim was reduced to $845 million. In 1988, West Germany allocated another $125 million for reparations. Companies such as BMW, Deutsche Bank, Ford, Opel, Siemens, and Volkswagen faced lawsuits for their use of forced labor during the war. In response, Germany set up the Remembrance, Responsibility, and Future Foundation in 2000, in which paid 4.45 billion euros to former slave laborers, up to 7,670 euros each. In 2013, Germany agreed to provide 772 million euros to fund nursing care, social services, and medication for 56,000 Holocaust survivors around the world. The French state-owned railway company, the SNCF, agreed in 2014 to pay $60 million to Jewish American survivors, around $100,000 each, for its role in the transport of 76,000 Jews from France to extermination camps between 1942 and 1944.
You know, that was a beautiful story, don't you think? Oh, I'm getting so sleepy. Oh, you fell asleep too. Oh, you're so adorable. Sweet dreams. And remember, everyone. Master. Hitler did nothing wrong.